Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Gainey, and this week we're going to be talking about partitioning rectangles into rows and columns. So I have my I can statement, or our I can statement written here. It says, I can partition a rectangle into rows and columns. So first we're going to talk about the word partition, which is in pink here. So partition means to separate or divide or to cut. We have just gone through fractions and we did the same thing with our fractions. We divided them into equal parts. So that's just like partitioning. Partitioning is dividing a rectangle into equal squares. So we're going to go ahead and move on to rows. Rows are going to be what we use to partition the rectangle. So rows, I want everybody to do this with me, so get your fingers ready. So rows are going to move side to side or horizontally. So everybody say this with me. Rows move side to side. Again, rows move side to side. Last time, rows move side to side. Good job, everybody. And then we also have our columns. So our columns are going to run vertical, which is up and down. So get your fingers ready again, guys. And we are going to run vertically here, okay, up and down. So columns run up and down. Again, columns run up and down. Last time, columns run up and down. Excellent job, guys. So let's take a closer look at what that looks like in a rectangle. So on my anchor chart, I've got my partition rectangle in rows and columns here, and I have made a total of 8 units. So if I count my squares, my equal squares, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this rectangle has been totally partitioned into rows and columns, and it makes 8 total units. Now let's look at how I partitioned my rows. So remember, rows run side to side. So I have my green rows here, and this rectangle I partitioned into 2 rows. So here's my first row here and my second row here. So 2 total rows. Rows run side to side. And then last, I have it partitioned with my columns. And my columns run up and down. Columns run up and down. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 columns that are running up and down. Now let's take a look at the bottom of my anchor chart here, where I have partitioned some more rectangles into different numbers of rows and columns. So my first one I partitioned into 3 rows and 4 columns. So let's take a look at how I did that. So remember, rows run side to side. So let's count how many rows I have. I have 1, 2, 3 rows total. Now let's look at how many columns I have. Columns, almost forgot. Columns run up and down, okay? Columns run up and down. So let's look at how many columns I have that are running up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have my 4 total columns. And now I can count up my 4 equal squares that I partitioned my rectangle into. So let's take a look and count them together. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, I have a very, very important tip that I want to tell you about that's on my pink sheet of paper up here. And on my pink sheet of paper, it says, always draw 1 less row and column. So when you're looking here at my rectangle, when I drew this, when I was drawing my rows, you notice I only drew 2 lines, and that made 3 rows. And I only drew 3 columns, which made 4 columns. So you always draw one less line. It's very, very important when you are drawing them on your own that you remember that important tip. So let's take a look at my last rectangle that I partitioned. So I partitioned it into 4 rows and 4 columns. So let's take a look here. Remember, rows go side to side, okay? Rows go side to side. So let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4. And how many lines did I draw? Well, let's take a look. 1, 2, 3. 1 less. Now let's look at my columns. Columns run up and down. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. And how many lines did I draw? Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3. 1 less. Always remember, when you draw them on your own, you draw 1 less. So altogether I have 4 rows, 4 columns, and then a total of 16 squares. So if I count them, or if we count them together, we're going to come up with 16 squares. So let's go ahead and do that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Good job, guys. Okay. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have you guys do a couple of practice questions with me. So I've got my whiteboard, and I want you guys to go ahead and pause the video and get a sheet of paper and a pencil. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. All right, guys. So I want you to draw your rectangles and partition them with me. All right, so we're going to do a little practice here. Little guided practice. So I have on my whiteboard, I've got my rows. Oops, messed up my total here. All right, I've got my rows. They run side to side. What do rows do, guys? Run side to side. And then I have my columns. And columns run what, guys? Up and down. Columns run up and down. All right, so I am going to go ahead and split or partition, which is the same thing as split or cut or divide, my rectangle into, let's do 3 rows and 2 columns. So go ahead and draw your rectangle with me. I'll do my best to make it nice and neat. It's hard to draw standing up. Here we go. All right, so I've got my rectangle. Now, I am going to partition it into 3 rows. Okay, so what do I do? Always remember my important tip on the pink sheet of paper. Always draw 1 less row and column than what it says. So if it says 3 rows, how many lines am I going to draw? 2. So here we go. We are going to draw 2 rows, and rows go across. 1, 2. But I have 1, 2, 3 rows now because I looked at my tip and remembered, that's right, I only draw 2 lines to get 3 rows. Again, 1, 2, 3. Now let's look at our columns. Columns run up and down, and if it says to have 2 columns, how many lines am I going to draw, boys and girls? That's right, 1. So I'm going to pick the middle of the rectangle, and I am going to draw 1 line because it says 2 columns. So now I have my 1 column and my 2 columns. How many total squares do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, we just do the best that we can to make it equal and make it look like squares. I know these look like rectangles, but because we're doing it freehand, sometimes it looks not as perfect as we'd like. All right, so let's do another one. I am going to write it down for you, and I want you to try it on your own, and then we'll check it together. So get ready to pause your video to try it on your own. All right, so let's do 4 rows and 5 columns. So I want you to draw your rectangle and then partition it into 4 rows and 5 columns and get your total squares. go ahead and pause the video and solve the problem. All right, guys, let's go ahead and take a look at how you did. I know you guys did an excellent job. All right, so I've got my rectangle drawn. So I'm going to go with 4 rows here. So I draw only 3 lines. 1, 2, 3. So I have my 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. Now I'm going to draw my 5 columns. So again, you draw 1 less line. So I'm going to draw 4 lines to make 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I'm going to double check my columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So we have 4 rows and 5 columns. Now we need to count up our total squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So all together, we have 20 total squares. Good job, guys. All right, we're going to do one more together, and then I will send you off to complete your activity. Let me erase here. Erase my rectangle. All right. So, last problem. Let's do 6 rows and 3 columns. Go ahead and draw your rectangle and partition it into 6 rows and 3 columns. Go ahead and pause the video so you can do that. All right, guys, let's take a look at what you did. I'm drawing my rectangle here. All right, so we're going to partition it into 6 rows. So again, how many lines are we going to draw? 1 less, 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's double check that I have all my rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Now we're going to draw 3 columns. Columns go up and down, and we want to make sure that we draw 1 less, which is going to be 2 lines. 1, 2. Now let's make sure that we have 3 columns. 1, 2, 3. It's so important that you always double check your work. All right, so now that we have all our 6 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and our 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, let's count up our total squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So it's a total of 18 squares. And remember, guys, try to draw your rows and columns as neatly as you can so you can count your total squares. So take your time drawing those lines because sometimes it gets a little tricky and it can get messy. So just try to use your best handwriting when you are drawing your rows and columns. Okay, great job, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to email your teacher and they can help you out. And great job participating. So proud of you guys. Keep up the hard work.